The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Jessica and Bradley cordially invite you to celebrate their union. My younger sister was getting married, and somehow, even the invitation felt cold. I should have seen the signs then. My name was printed alone, no plus one, no and guest. Just Sarah Chen, single, solitary, expendable. You're overthinking it, my best friend Marcus had said when I showed him. It's probably just a budget thing. But I knew Jessica. I knew my family. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew this was going to hurt. The day of the wedding dawned bright and mockingly beautiful. I'd spent $300 on a dress. Navy blue, elegant, appropriate. Not white, not cream, nothing that could possibly upstage the bride. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. I'd learned that lesson years ago when I wore a red dress to Jessica's graduation, and my mother had taken me aside, her manicured fingers digging into my arm. Why must you always make everything about yourself? I hadn't been trying to. I just felt pretty that day. But pretty wasn't allowed when Jessica was in the room. The ceremony was at the Grandview Estate, one of those sprawling venues with manicured gardens and a fountain that cost more than my car. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem desperate for attention, not late enough to be rude. The parking lot was already full of luxury sedans and SUVs. My 10-year-old Honda Civic looked embarrassed just being there. Inside the venue, the lobby bustled with guests in designer clothes, air kissing and laughing in that practiced way wealthy people have. I recognized most of them. My parents' country club friends, Jessica's sorority sisters, Bradley's corporate lawyer colleagues, the kind of people who measured success in square footage and vacation homes. I smoothed my dress and walked toward the ceremony space, clutching my small purse like a shield. That's when I saw it, the seating chart. It was displayed on an enormous gold easel, calligraphied names arranged under table numbers. I found mine easily. I'd been trained since childhood to look for my name on the lists, always checking if I'd been included, always half expecting to be forgotten. Table 17, Sarah Chen. My heart sank. I counted quickly. 20 tables total. Tables 1-5 were clearly close to the head table, family, and VIPs. Tables 6-12 seemed to be the main guest list. Tables 13-20. I walked into the reception hall, following the table numbers, past the dance floor, past the bar, past the beautifully decorated tables with their centerpieces of white roses and gold candlesticks. Table 17 was in the back corner, not just back, the furthest possible corner of the room, partially hidden behind a support column. The table where you put people you're obligated to invite but don't actually want there. The table where you seat your embarrassing relatives, your parents' weird friends, the plus ones of plus ones. But I wasn't a plus one. I was the bride's sister. I stood there, staring at the table, feeling something crack inside my chest. Around me, other guests were finding their seats, exclaiming with delight at being seated near the bride's family or next to old friends. No one else seemed to be walking as far back as I was. "Sarah!" I turned. My mother was gliding toward me in a silver gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile was bright and sharp as broken glass. "Darling, you made it. Don't you look nice?" The pause before nice said everything. "Now Jessica is getting ready for photos, so we won't be able to chat much before the ceremony, but we'll catch up at the reception. Mom." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Why am I seated at table 17? Her smile never wavered. "What do you mean?" "I'm at the back of the room, behind a pillar. I'm Jessica's sister." "Oh, honey." She reached out and patted my arm, the gesture somehow more dismissive than comforting. We had to make some difficult seating decisions. Jessica has so many important friends, and Bradley's family is quite large. The table arrangement was very complex. "But I'm family." "And you have a lovely table. Now I really must go. The photographer is waiting. Enjoy the ceremony, dear." She was gone before I could respond, leaving me standing there with the truth settling over me like cold water. I'd been deliberately placed as far from my family as possible. This wasn't an oversight or a space limitation. This was intentional. I found my seat at table 17 just as the ceremony was starting. The other seats were empty. Apparently, I'd be joined by people running even later than acceptable. I sat down, smoothed my dress again, and prepared to watch my sister get married from a distance that felt more emotional than physical. The ceremony was beautiful, of course. Jessica looked stunning in her mermaid-cut gown, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate updo. Bradley was handsome in his tuxedo, his smile wide as he watched his bride walk down the aisle on our father's arm. My father, who hadn't called me in 3 months, who had forgotten my last birthday, who had somehow found time to walk Jessica to 17 different venue appointments but couldn't return my texts. I watched them exchange vows, watched my mother dab at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, watched the front rows filled with people beaming and celebrating. From my corner, partially obscured by the pillar, I felt like a ghost at my own sister's wedding. When it was over, during cocktail hour, I tried to approach Jessica. She was surrounded by bridesmaids, none of whom were me, of course. That slight had come 6 months ago when she'd asked her college roommate, her best friend from high school, Bradley's sister, and 2 cousins to be in her wedding party, carefully explaining that she wanted to keep it small and intimate. "Jess!" I called, pushing through the crowd. She turned, her smile faltering for just a moment when she saw me. "Sarah, hi. You look beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Congratulations." "Thank you." She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to disturb her makeup. "I'm so glad you could make it. Make it." As if I'd been invited to a casual coffee date, not my only sister's wedding. "Can we talk for just a minute?" I asked. Her eyes darted to her bridesmaids, who were watching with polite but distant expressions. "Oh, we're actually about to do photos. And then I have to greet some of Bradley's family. They flew in from Singapore, and I'm at table 17, Jessica." She blinked. "What?" "My table. I'm in the back corner of the room, behind a pillar. Was that your idea, or Mom's?" Her cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice stayed bright and cheerful. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. We had to make difficult decisions about seating. Not everyone can be at the front. But I'm your sister, and you have a seat, a perfectly fine seat. Now please, I really need to go. This is my wedding day, and I'm not going to let you make it about you like you always do." The words hit like a slap. Before I could respond, she'd turned away, her bridesmaids closing ranks around her, like guards protecting a princess from an unwanted petitioner. I stood there, alone in the crowd of celebrating guests, feeling tears prick at my eyes. I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. I made my way back to table 17, past the cocktail hour festivities, past the laughter and champagne toasts. I sat down in my assigned seat and stared at the empty chairs around me. That's when he arrived. "Table 17. I looked up. A man stood beside the table, checking his phone against a small card. He was maybe 40, with silver threading through his dark hair, dressed in a well-tailored suit that marked him as someone who belonged at this wedding more than I did. His face was kind, with laugh lines around his eyes. "Yes," I said. "Apparently, we're the lucky ones." He laughed, a genuine sound that startled me. "Stephen Park," he said, extending his hand. "And I'm guessing by your tone that you're as thrilled about this seating arrangement as I am." "Sarah Chen." I shook his hand. "Sister of the bride, believe it or not." His eyebrows rose. "Sister of the bride at table 17? Now that's a story." "It's not a very interesting one," I said bitterly. "Just your standard family rejection narrative." He sat down beside me, not across, but in the chair directly next to mine. "In my experience, those are always the most interesting stories. I'm Bradley's uncle, for what it's worth, his father's younger brother, the black sheep of the family, who had the audacity to become a high school teacher instead of a lawyer." "High school teacher?" "English," he said with a slight smile. "I know, not exactly impressive at a wedding full of corporate attorneys and investment bankers. I think I'm seated back here as punishment for my career choices." Despite everything, I felt myself smile. "What do you teach?" "Literature, mostly, currently inflicting the Great Gatsby on a class of sophomores who think TikTok is literature." "Is it?" "Some of it is more literary than they realize," he admitted. "But don't tell them I said that." The reception was starting, guests filtering to their tables. Ours slowly filled with an eclectic mix: an elderly couple who turned out to be distant cousins of Bradley's mother, a young woman who was someone's plus one and spent the entire evening on her phone, and two middle-aged men who immediately started a heated debate about cryptocurrency. Stephen and I, by unspoken agreement, turned slightly away from the others and created our own bubble of conversation. "So," he said quietly as the salads were served, "what's the real story here?" Maybe it was because he was a stranger. Maybe it was because he'd admitted his own outsider status. Maybe it was because I'd been holding it in for so long that the dam was about to break anyway. I told him everything. I told him about growing up as the older sister, the one who was supposed to set the example but somehow never got it quite right. About Jessica, brilliant and beautiful and perfect, who could do no wrong. About the gradual shift as we got older. The way family gatherings started to feel like Jessica appreciation events while I faded into the background. About college, where I'd worked 3 jobs to pay tuition, while Jessica got a full ride plus spending money from our parents. About my career as a social worker, not as prestigious as Jessica's marketing position at a tech startup, my mother loved to note, and how my choice to help underprivileged children was seen as somehow less valuable than Jessica's work optimizing advertisement algorithms. About the engagement, when Jessica had taken Mom and our cousins and her friends on a weekend trip to Napa to celebrate, but hadn't invited me because "you're always so busy with work, and we didn't think you'd want to take the time off." About the wedding planning, where I'd been excluded from every decision, while simultaneously being asked to contribute financially to the bachelorette party I wasn't invited to. The bridal shower I wasn't asked to help host. The rehearsal dinner I only learned about when my mother mentioned it in passing. "And now this," I said, gesturing to our corner of the room. "The final statement. You're not really family. You're just obligatory." Stephen was quiet for a moment, turning his wine glass in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "That's incredibly painful. The worst part is that I keep hoping it'll change," I admitted. "Every time I think maybe this time they'll see me. Maybe this time I'll matter. But I never do." "You matter," he said firmly. "Your family's inability to see your value doesn't diminish it." I laughed bitterly. "That's very kind, but I'm not being kind. I'm being honest." He leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, I've been a teacher for 18 years. I've seen hundreds of students. And you know what I've learned? The ones who get overlooked are often the ones with the most to offer. They're too busy actually doing things, making a difference, living authentically to play the games that get you noticed." "That's a nice theory." "It's not a theory. You're a social worker, right? Working with underprivileged kids?" "Yes. That's a calling, not a career. Most people couldn't do it. It's too hard, too emotionally demanding, doesn't pay enough, doesn't come with enough glory. But you do it anyway. That tells me more about your character than 1,000 wedding seating charts." I felt tears threatening again, but for a different reason this time. When was the last time someone had acknowledged what I did? When had anyone in my family asked about my work, about the kids I helped, about the difference I was making? The dinner progressed. At the front of the room, my family was laughing and toasting and celebrating. Jessica and Bradley made their rounds to the important tables, spending 10, 15, 20 minutes at each one. They never made it to the back of the room. Stephen and I kept talking. He told me about his own family drama, parents who'd never forgiven him for not following the family law firm tradition, siblings who thought teaching was wasting his potential. He told me about his divorce 3 years ago, how he'd chosen himself over expectations, and how terrifying and liberating that had been. "The thing about family," he said as dessert was served, "is that we're taught from childhood that they're supposed to be everything. Our support system, our cheerleaders, our safety net. And when they're not those things, when they actively hurt us, we blame ourselves. We think we must be defective because surely family wouldn't reject us without cause." "Exactly," I breathed. "But sometimes families are just wrong. Sometimes they're toxic or dysfunctional or blind. And recognizing that isn't betrayal, it's survival." The DJ announced the father-daughter dance. I watched my father lead Jessica onto the floor, both of them beaming. When was the last time my father had hugged me? I couldn't remember. "I think I need to leave," I said suddenly. I can't keep sitting here pretending this is okay." "Then don't," Stephen said simply. "What?" "Leave. You don't owe them anything, Sarah. You showed up, you wore the dress, you sat in the corner. That was more than they deserved. If you want to leave, leave. But people will notice. People will notice a woman at table 17 leaving early. He shook his head. The only people who'll notice are the ones back here with us. And we're all outsiders anyway. No one important is paying attention to us. He was right. That's what hurt most. He was absolutely right. Come on, he said, standing and offering his hand. Let's get out of here. You're leaving too? I've done my familial duty, sat through the ceremony, ate the overpriced chicken, pretended to enjoy myself. I'd much rather spend the rest of the evening somewhere interesting. There's a good coffee shop about 10 minutes from here. We could continue this conversation without the depressing backdrop of your family's dysfunction. I looked at his hand, then at the front of the room where Jessica was now dancing with Bradley, then back at table 17 with its clear message, "You don't belong here." I took his hand and stood up. We walked out together, past the distracted guests, past the bar where no one noticed us leaving, past the venue entrance where the night air hit cool and refreshing. My car was still in the lot, looking humble and out of place. "Follow me," Stephen suggested, pulling out his phone to send me the address. At the coffee shop, a cozy place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, we claimed a corner table and ordered drinks. Here, in this space that had nothing to do with my family or their judgment, I felt like I could breathe for the first time all day. "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said. "Besides, you're much better company than a table of cryptocurrency enthusiasts." We talked for hours about books and teaching and social work and the kids we both spent our lives trying to help, about dreams and disappointments and the courage it takes to keep showing up when the world doesn't seem to value what you do, about the families we're born into and the families we choose. At some point, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Where did you go? People are asking." I stared at it, reading the words carefully. Not, "Are you okay?" or "Is everything all right?" Just concern about what people were thinking. I typed back, "I left. Enjoy the rest of the evening." Another buzz, almost immediately. "How could you embarrass Jessica like this on her special day?" Stephen must have seen my face change, because he asked quietly, "Everything okay?" "My mother," I said, showing him the text. Apparently, leaving my isolated table in the corner is embarrassing to Jessica. "May I?" He gestured to my phone. At my nod, he took it and typed, "Sarah didn't embarrass anyone. Your seating arrangement did that. She deserves better. Stephen Park, concerned witness." He hit send before I could stop him. "You didn't have to." "Someone should say it," he said firmly. "And honestly, Sarah, what are they going to do? Exclude you more? You're already excluded. You have nothing to lose by standing up for yourself." My phone exploded with texts after that. My mother, furious. Jessica, crying apparently, saying I'd ruined her day. My father, cold and stern, saying I'd shown my true colors. Cousins and aunts weighing in with their opinions. I watched them pour in, all these people who hadn't bothered to check on me once during the entire wedding, suddenly very concerned now that I'd violated protocol by leaving. Stephen watched me read them. "What are you feeling, honestly?" I looked up at him. "Free." "Good," he smiled. "That's exactly what you should feel." I turned off my phone and slipped it into my purse. The fallout was spectacular. Over the next week, I received dozens of messages from family members. Most were critical. How dare I leave? How selfish I was. How I'd always been jealous of Jessica. How I'd proven everyone right about me. A few were from Jessica herself, ranging from tearful accusations to angry ultimatums. I responded to none of them. Instead, I had coffee with Stephen 3 more times that week. We talked about books and life and family trauma. He introduced me to his favorite students' essays, the ones that showed real promise. I told him about the teenage girl in my caseload who'd finally agreed to go back to school, about the foster kid who'd been placed with a family that actually seemed to love him. "You're amazing," Stephen said one afternoon at that same coffee shop. "You know that, right?" "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're changing lives. There's a difference." On day 8, I finally turned my phone back on to a voicemail from my mother. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. "Sarah." Her voice was different, strained. "We need to talk. There's been a situation. Call me back." I showed Stephen the voicemail. "Think it's a trap?" "Probably." he admitted, but aren't you curious? I was. I called my mother from Stephen's apartment, putting her on speaker with his encouraging nod. Sarah, thank God. She sounded genuinely rattled. There's been a problem with the wedding. What kind of problem? Bradley's family, they're upset. Very upset. About what? A long pause. About how you were treated. Stephen apparently told them. His nephew, my son-in-law. He told them about the seating arrangement and about you leaving, and about the texts. He showed them the texts. I looked at Stephen, who smiled slightly and shrugged. Okay, I said slowly. And? And Bradley's parents are furious. They're saying it reflects poorly on our family, that we treated you shamefully. They're saying, she took a shaky breath, they're saying they won't honor some of the financial commitments they made for the wedding unless we make this right. Make what right? With you. They want us to apologize. Publicly, Bradley's mother is insisting that we acknowledge how we excluded you and make amends. I let that sink in. Bradley's family, the same family I'd never met before the wedding, was going to bat for me because Stephen had told them the truth. What does Jessica say? I asked. Jessica is devastated. She's saying we've all embarrassed her, that her in-laws think we're terrible people. Are you? I interrupted. Terrible people. Silence. Mom, you seated me in the back corner of the room, behind a pillar, at my own sister's wedding. You excluded me from every part of it. The wedding planning, every celebration, every family moment. And when I finally left because it was too painful to stay, you didn't ask if I was okay. You asked how I could embarrass Jessica. We didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant all of it. Every exclusion, every dismissal, every time you've made me feel like I don't matter. You meant it. My voice was steady now, clear. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to accept any apology that's motivated by Bradley's family's money. If you want to apologize to me, really apologize, you'll do it because you actually realize you were wrong, not because it's financially convenient. Sarah, please. I'm done begging for scraps of attention from my own family. I'm done trying to earn love that should be freely given. You want to make this right. Start by asking yourself why you needed Bradley's family to tell you that you treated your own daughter terribly. I hung up. Stephen was grinning. That was perfect. Was it too harsh? Are you kidding? That was exactly what you needed to say. He paused. So what now? Now? I took a deep breath. Now I stop waiting for them to change and start building the life I want. 3 months later, I was having dinner with Stephen, a real date, not just coffee, when my phone rang. Jessica. I'd been ignoring her calls for weeks, but tonight, feeling strong and happy, I answered, Sarah. Her voice was small, different from the confident tone I was used to. Can we talk? We're talking now. In person, I mean. Please hear me out. I looked at Stephen, who nodded supportively. Okay, coffee tomorrow, the place on 3rd Street. She agreed immediately. Jessica arrived looking thinner, tired. Her usual polish was muted. She ordered a tea and sat across from me, hands wrapped around the cup like she was cold. Thank you for meeting me, she said. What did you want to say? I'm sorry. The words came out in a rush. I'm so sorry, Sarah. About everything. The wedding, the seating, the things I said. All of it. I waited. Bradley's family they've been treating me differently since the wedding. Especially his mother. She keeps making these comments about how family should be valued, how the way people treat others shows their true character. And Bradley, she wiped at her eyes. Bradley told me he was disappointed in me, in how I treated you. He said he didn't realize how bad it was until Stephen explained everything. So, you're apologizing because your in-laws and husband are disappointed. No, I mean, yes, that's part of it, but she took a shaky breath. Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about us, about our childhood, about everything. And I realize I've been awful to you for years, maybe forever. Why? It was the question I'd wanted to ask for so long. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe because Mom and Dad always made it a competition and I was winning. Maybe because it was easier to keep you at a distance than to acknowledge how much pressure I was under to be perfect. Maybe I'm just a terrible person. You're not terrible, I said quietly, but you did terrible things. I know. Tears were flowing now. I know, and I can't take them back. But Sarah, I want to try. I want to do better. I want to be your sister. Really be your sister. If you'll let me. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I saw past the perfect facade to the scared, pressured person underneath. And I realized something. I could forgive her, or not. I could let her back into my life, or not. But either way, I was going to be okay. I need time, I said finally. A lot of time. And things can't go back to how they were. I understand. If we're going to rebuild this, it has to be real. No more competition. No more exclusion. No more pretending I don't matter. Yes, she said eagerly. Yes, absolutely. Anything you need. And therapy. We both need therapy. Probably family therapy, too, if mom and dad are willing. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Bradley's been suggesting the same thing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. A year later, I stood in that same coffee shop where Stephen and I had first really talked. He was beside me, holding my hand, as we waited for Jessica and Bradley to arrive for a double date. My relationship with my family was still complicated. My parents had eventually apologized, a real apology, not one motivated by money, and we were slowly rebuilding. There were boundaries now, clear ones, and consequence when they were crossed. We had family dinners once a month and therapy sessions twice a month. It was hard work, but it was work they were finally willing to do. Jessica and I were talking regularly. She'd left her high-pressure marketing job and was now working for a nonprofit that helped women in business. She was different, softer, more real, more honest about her struggles. We'd never be as close as some sisters, but we were building something genuine. And Stephen? Stephen had become my person, the stranger who sat beside me when no one else would, who saw me when I felt invisible, who reminded me that I was worth fighting for. You know what's funny? I said, as we saw Jessica and Bradley walk up to the shop. What's that? That day at the wedding, I felt like my life was over, like being isolated, being pushed aside, was the final proof that I didn't matter. And now I realize it was the beginning. If they hadn't seated me at table 17, I never would have met you. I never would have had the courage to walk away. I never would have learned that I could survive without their approval. He squeezed my hand. Karma works in mysterious ways. That it does. Jessica saw us and waved, her smile genuine and warm. She'd come a long way from the bride who'd dismissed my pain as attention-seeking. We all had, as we settled in for dinner, laughing and talking in a way that felt natural and unforced. I thought about that wedding day, about sitting alone at table 17, feeling worthless and invisible, about the stranger who'd sat beside me and changed everything. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are really doorways to something better. Sometimes being pushed aside is exactly what we need to find our way forward. And sometimes karma doesn't come as revenge or punishment. It comes as a kind stranger, a coffee shop conversation, and the courage to finally choose yourself. I chose myself that night when I walked away from table 17, and in doing so, I found something my family had never given me: the certainty that I was enough, exactly as I was. The isolation that was meant to diminish me had freed me instead, and that was the sweetest karma of all.